from the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you're with us tonight. Talking about a great new program, getting guns off the street. The Metro Police Department is partnering with churches to get guns off the streets. So we'll talk about how that program works, what it's part of a bigger effort really within the police department. And so we're going to get into that. And I'm very happy that the people who are going to talk about it are here. They're sitting beside me. They're not on Zoom. They're right up here. So I want to welcome both of our guests, Lieutenant Stephen Bowers and Inspector David Imhof, both with the Metro Police Department.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. And both with the Office of Alternative Policing Strategies.
Yes,
right?
Yes, sir.
So, again, thank you all for being here. Let me start with you, Inspector Imhof.
Yes, sir.
Office of Policing Strategies, Alternative Policing Strategies. What is that?
So prior to me taking this position, I was at East Precinct. I was the commander of the East Precinct for nearly 10 years. Back in February of last year, Chief Drake, Chief Taylor, Chief Green approached me and asked me if I would be willing to take on a new responsibility and a new challenge. That challenge being the Office of Alternative Policing Strategies. And of course I was like, sounds great, what is that? So what it turned out to be, Chief Drake had some ideas in mind about how we deal with some issues in Nashville. One, mental illness, people that are experiencing behavioral health crisis. How as we as a department can we do that better? And some of that came out of the Policing Policy Commission and working with the Behavioral Health and Wellness Advisory Council, some recommendations from them. So we initially started the co-response program, in which we were partnering with Mental Health Cooperative and having a clinician ride with a CIT or a crisis intervention trained officer who's had 40 hours of additional training on top of what we already have to go out and serve those consumers that are experiencing behavioral health crisis. So that was the first project he really wanted me to kind of dive into. Other ones were, a juvenile assessment center, juvenile diversion program, as well as a gun retrieval program. And actually the gun retrieval program is kind of interesting. As I was researching some of the juvenile assessment programs and juvenile diversion, I came across a story where a captain in another city was getting contacted by families saying, hey, we think there's a gun in the house with a juvenile. Can you please come over? We'll sign a consent. You search the house. And he did. And he went over there and he found a gun, and then he turned the gun in and didn't charge anybody. So I started thinking that's a pretty good idea. If we're just the goal is just trying to get guns out of kids' hands, make kids safe. We want them to be safe, alive, and free, right? Mm-hmm. So we started thinking about it, and we came up with the idea, and Lieutenant Bowers really taken this and ran with it. But who can we partner with that would be kind of a neutral party where people would feel comfortable taking weapons to? And obviously, we're in the Bible Belt, and we have a lot of great churches in Nashville and a lot of great pastors that want to go out and serve and make our community safer. So we went out and started partnering with churches and started this program.
You started partnering with churches, and we'll talk about some of those other programs. We've even had people from the mental health initiative you discussed on this show. We'll talk more about that.
Sure.
But I want to. Lieutenant, so you reached out to churches.
Yes, sir.
And what sort of reaction did you get? How did you go about doing that?
So what I did is, obviously I'm from Nashville, so I've been on the department for 13 years. And one of the things I did is reached out to the churches that I know around town. When I first came over in September of 2021 to the Office of Alternative Policing Strategies, there was already a couple of churches that were on board with the program. It hadn't officially launched yet. So what I did is I would communicate with those pastors, and they would have other pastors who they would reach out to, and it just kind of branched and grew from that standpoint. So I would go out, and then once it started gaining traction, I would make contact with more churches and more churches. So we officially launched last week on March the 1st, and we have a total of 9 churches that have joined us and partnered with us in regards to the gun retrieval program. So it's been going great so far. In the first week, we've gotten several guns turned in at different churches throughout the county, and we're just trying to make sure we continue to grow the program and hopefully it be a success.
Do you have a story from a pastor who you approached and the pastor was like, this is great and here's why it's great? I mean, Pastors, in many ways, they're seeing this stuff on the front lines, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
so what are some of the stories you're hearing from pastors about why they want to be part of this?
So one of the main pastors who's been helping with the program is Pastor Samuel Orr at the Rock United Ministries. One of the stories he told me is he's tired of seeing our young people die before their parents. I've heard him say that over and over when me and him talk about issues and gun violence in the neighborhoods. But just seeing the rise in gun violence in his area, his church is in the north area, but one thing he's always said is, if he can get one gun turned in his gun case at his church, then he feels like, that may save one life. And that's the same perspective I have on it. I always say if we can get how many ever guns we can get off the streets, that may affect a family where it saves somebody's life.
How many guns? This started last week?
Yes, sir.
So it's brand new.
Yes, sir.
How many guns so far?
So far, we've had 8 guns.
8 guns.
Yes, sir.
And what's the situation now with guns in Nashville? And I'll let you take that. I mean, I get these news releases about guns stolen from cars and unlocked cars and that kind of thing. What's the situation right
the
now?
last report that came out was yesterday, and I think right now last year we had a total of over 1,300 guns stolen from vehicles. Okay, this year so far we're at 320 so far, just from cars. So right now we're on pace to surpass the 1,300, but we've had 451 guns taken total in Nashville, not just from cars, but in total. So that's just, and we know from looking at ring footage and cameras that we're seeing a lot of young people out in neighborhoods, especially in those neighborhoods with a lot of cars parked on the street, and they get out and they just start checking door handles. And we're seeing more and more guns left in vehicles. And so we know those guns are getting into the wrong hands. When I say the wrong hands, I mean young people. Young people that have no business with guns in their hand. And what we're trying to really accomplish is get some of those guns back, try to make sure some of these young folks that really don't need to have a gun, their parents may not know they have a gun, and try to get those out of their hand and where they can do it safely. And the parents can do it where they don't feel there's going to be adverse situation happen to their child.
Because there won't be an adverse situation, right? If you turn in this gun, there's no questions asked, or what about that?
Correct. So the program is anonymous, and so we know that a lot of people look at churches as a safe haven. So somebody may be more reluctant to turn a gun in to, bring it to the police station or talk to the police about handing over a gun to that officer. So once they go to these churches, I go out and I assign gun cases to the churches. Once somebody brings a weapon to that location, that gun is locked in that case. The police are called out and they come and retrieve that weapon. No questions asked process, so when the officer gets there, they're not asking questions to the pastors of who dropped the weapon off. They're not asking for names. They're not putting names in the police report as far as once they document that they came to that location to pick that weapon up.
So I ask about what are you hearing from pastors? Do you know of the guns that you've taken? Do you have a story about how it got there, or it's just so anonymous you don't?
So it stays anonymous, and when those weapons are turned in, we still check them to see if they're stolen, and we still do kniving checks on them to check them to see if they're related to another crime. If an investigator is working a case where a weapon is turned in and it's linked to another crime, they still can do their legwork and their investigation on that, but they will not go back to these locations seeking information from the pastors or the staff of the church.
It's also important to note that we've talked to General Funk, and he's on board with this. He's emailed us. He's given the support of the program where him and none of his attorneys, anybody in the DA's office, is not going to go back and try to go backwards and find out who gave this gun to this pastor or try to subpoena a pastor who's involved in this program to try to get to the point of where this gun came from. Because what we're really looking at here is, yes, the detectives are still going to work their cases if this gun was related to a crime. That's not going to stop. We're still going to get the ballistics done from these weapons. We're still going to do the kniving checks on these weapons. We're still going to do all those different things. But this is just a safe place to turn the gun in, because a lot of these cases, we would never have seen the gun.
Right. Yeah, you're ahead of the game at this point.
Absolutely.
You've got the gun.
Yep. That's the hope, yes.
Yeah. All right, we already have some calls here. Let's take a couple of calls. Let's go to Larry. Hello, Larry.
This is Larry. Yes,
Larry,
hello.
hi. Hi, go right ahead, Larry.
Yes, I want to commend you guys, the officers and everybody for what you do and stuff like that. I think it's a great program, what you're doing. You keep it up. But my question is, what are your thoughts and opinions about the government's proposal or governor's proposal of legislation to allow 18-year-olds to walk around with guns with no permit or training? I think I'll listen to your response.
Permitless carry. You may not. I don't know. Well, you hear the question. You can just do whatever you want with it. So he's asking about legislation and proposed legislation with allowing permitless carry, and it started for 21 and over. Now I believe there's a proposal to lower it to 18. Do you have thoughts about that?
Well, I think the biggest thing right now, the current law is you have to be 21 years old to have a gun on you without a permit, and not be intoxicated, not be a felon, not have illegal substances on you or be under the influence of any illegal substance. And now there are some exceptions to that rule right now. If you're 18 and or you're active military, or you've been honorably discharged and you're under 21, those are exceptions to the law. Now, I'm not really up or familiar with whatever new law is being proposed. I don't know the particulars of that, so I'd hate to comment on something I'm just not really familiar with.
Yeah. And okay, I understand that. And so, let's talk bigger picture. How much of our gun problem is with teens? I mean, you're reaching out to churches. Are you hoping? It sounds like with all these guns that are being stolen, is that a lot of teens that are doing it, or what do we know as far as big picture?
Yeah, Inspector talked about it earlier, but a lot of times what we see from Ring video footage or Nest Cam footage from neighbors turning in cameras footage over to the police department, you see a lot of juveniles out there that are going through neighborhoods, checking car doors, breaking into cars, and we have a lot of reports where people make those police reports saying, hey, my vehicle was broken into and my gun was stolen, or I forgot to lock my doors and the gun was stolen out of the car. But we see a lot of young people out there committing the crimes of breaking into cars and stealing the guns. Just looking at some of the numbers, when we talk about juveniles, just looking at the last 2 years, when you look at 2020, we had over 170 juveniles arrested in gun possession. And then last year we had over 120 arrested. So we're trying to do all we can, think outside the box a little bit, strategize on how we can reverse those trends and get those numbers to go down, because you have 170 plus in 2020 and then you have 123 last year. We're just trying to make sure those numbers go way below those high numbers in the hundreds of getting these guns out of the hands of juveniles.
Wow. Okay, let's take another call here. Let's go to Paul. Hello, Paul.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, my question is for the police, is with this new law, from the way I understand it, anybody over 21 without a felony can walk around with a gun on their hip. How are the police able to determine whether that person is eligible to even be carrying a gun? Do they ever walk up to anybody they see wearing a gun and do a background check to see if they have a felony, or if they have a mental situation, or if they've been under a protection order, any of that kind of stuff?
Well, that's not quite on topic, because again, the topic, I'll let you answer that, because
Sure.
people are interested. But then what we're talking about is this gun retrieval program, not this law that's been proposed. But so here's another question. I'll just let you take that.
Right now, if you're over 21 years of age, unless you have the exception, you are allowed to carry a gun without a permit, right? So for us to stop you, detain you, and investigate the thought that you may be carrying illegally, we got to have some type of reasonable suspicion to articulate to be able to stop you and detain you for a reasonable amount of time to be able to investigate those suspicions. So if you just have an individual walking down the street and I can see a gun on them, unless they're displaying some type of behavior or I have some type of information for me to reasonably stop them, detain them, and investigate that, I can't really do anything about it. Unless there's some observable behavior that I'm seeing that they be saying, I need to approach this person. They're acting in a threatening manner, or some reason that I have a right to stop and detain.
So you wouldn't just do that. And then back on topic here, we're about to go to break, but bottom line for this program, the goal is to get guns off the street, and it's something that's desperately needed. Is this something that we're seeing in other cities? Is this something that's been modeled after another city, or is this pretty unique here to Nashville?
I think the way we're approaching it is a little bit unique. I know Lieutenant Bowers we've seen programs in other cities. I think St. Louis is what you discovered, which was more of a consent to search program, which is kind of similar to what I read about the captain, where if you want the police to come into your house, sign a consent, you can search the house. We're not going to charge you, and we'll just get the gun out of the house. We're hoping to be able to get more guns by doing it with this approach. So it's somewhat new.
That seems scary, what you just said, to allow the police to come in your house and search and look for
And that's my understanding of their program.
Yeah. It seems like this would be less threatening.
And let me say this too. We are not trying to take the guns out of law-abiding citizens, hunters, people that do all the right things. That's not what the goal of this program is. The goal of this program is to get the guns out of hands of children that don't need to have guns in their hand. So a lot of what we're doing, we've talked to, and Lieutenant Byers has done a lot of this, talking to different agencies like the Oasis Center and different agencies, Inner City Ministries, Martha O'Brien Center, to try to, and we love talking to those folks, but we want to talk to the parents that they interact with. We want to talk to the caretakers, the foster parents, the grandparents, who's ever in children's life, and really make a plea to them to really be active in their children, especially if they're an at-risk child. To look in that backpack if you have suspicions, to look in their room, to look in the car. If they find a gun, here's an alternative. Because they might be too scared to call the police. They might be too scared to call if their child or the young person is on probation at juvenile court, but they don't know what to do with this gun. Well, this is an alternative.
Call the police, call your pastor.
Exactly.
And just go there and they'll take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, so they don't have to be a member of the church. We have pamphlets that we've completed, and they'll be pushed out pretty soon. But it may be somebody in the community who just wants to, who's heard about the program, who's, I may have been in front of a group of parents or grandparents or these groups to interact with these kids. But it may be somebody out there who is not a member of a specific church, and they hear about the program. I know just from the last week, there has been, non-members of churches that'll go to the locations because they've heard that is one of the locations that they can turn in a weapon, and they go to that location and turn that weapon in. So, what if there's
a church out there watching that wants to be part of it? How do you approach the churches? How would they approach you? What about that?
So our information is out there on our MNPD page. We just updated our information with the gun retrieval program and some of the other programs the inspector talked about earlier. But they could go to our MNPD page. They also could call me. My number is also in that email. My email is actually in that webpage, but they can contact me, and then I can reach out to them, and we can join up and partner up. Right now, the program is in 4 different locations. I know one of the questions that I got is, why is it not everywhere? Well, we want to start off small and grow it, into a larger program instead of, having it large and not receiving any weapons. Right now, those locations are in North, East Precinct, Madison, and Hermitage. So they have multiple churches in these areas, and pretty soon, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to branch it out into the other areas throughout Davidson County.
That's great. All right, we're going to continue talking about this and really just alternative policing strategies. So we will take a break. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.